Brock, welcome. It's always good to see you, my friend. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day today to join us here at Active Prospect for what should be a fun and insightful dive into insurance lead generation and the state of the industry. Today, we're going to be diving into what's shaping the industry, how compliance and technology are influencing strategies, and what that means for brands looking to stay ahead. Before we jump into the action, a little housekeeping. There is a chat icon and a questions icon on the right. Please use the chat section for general comments and interactions with other participants. And please use the question section for questions. Brock and I love interaction, and we'll be jumping into the chat throughout the conversation to answer questions as they come in. Also, be on the lookout for a few polls during the session to help shape our discussion. And lastly, a link to today's recording will be emailed out tomorrow morning for reference and sharing with your colleagues. All right, so now we got through that. My name is Matt Frazier, and I am the GM of insurance here at Active Prospect. I've been deeply involved with the insurance lead generation space over my career, and today I am very excited to be joined alongside my good friend and industry vet, Brock Thompson, Vice President of QuoteWizard by LendingTree. Brock, welcome.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, everybody, for joining Active Prospect. Thank you for having me. This is a great honor. Matt, I'm happy to return the favor. I know you joined me at the last conference in Vegas, where we kind of dove into this topic initially, and to have me back on, it's like I said, it's a great honor. So thank you for including me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to see you, man. You always have great content, and we're excited to hear your perspective of the industry. To start, let's just jump right into a poll so we can gauge where everybody is. Take a look. What are you most excited to hear about today? We have a few selections there. Please fill it out, and we'll do our best to hit on those topics. But to start, Brock, I'd love to hear. I think we all would love to hear about your journey into this industry. You've been a part of a lot of prominent organizations throughout your career. Very similar to the GOAT, Joe Flacco, I might add. Brock is a Cleveland sports fanatic, so.
Yeah, I'd love to. And, I've been around this is my 20th year in the space right now. I started in insurance as an agent, actually selling the product, the property casualty product over the phones. I've held roles as a scrum master, a product owner, a C-suite executive, done the biz dev. I'm one of the unique individuals that has worked on all sides of our products. So working with both the carriers and the publishers, working with the technology, the data, both insurance products as well as SaaS products, bringing a number of different things to market over my 20 years. And, I know we got a quick second here. So, for the audience, I'm going to tell a quick PG story, Matt, of how you and I met. I think it's we're going to do one of these where it's a webinar after dark, where we can get a little bit more into some of the conferences and some of the fun stories. For now, I'll keep it TNT afternoon. But I know, Matt and I have known each other for a while now. I think it was a little over 10 years ago we had met. We were at a conference in Vegas, and I'm sitting at the Circle Bar in Paris, having a cocktail, waiting on a buddy of mine. We're going to go up to the Mirage, have a cigar, watch some of the games, and have a beer. And guy sits down beside me, and he leans over, and he's like, "Hey, man," he's like, "that's a really deep V-neck shirt that you have on." And I kind of lean back. I'm like, "Hey, thank you." And he can't hold the laughter, and he's just cracking up. He's beat red. Over his shoulder, I see another industry friend of all of ours. He can't stop crying laughing. And clearly had put Matt up. We had never met before, obviously, and had put Matt up to come over. We very quickly thereafter we struck out a nice relationship. We struck out a mutual respect for one another. And, it's a testament to how we in the industry can connect, how we can move forward together across multiple roles, and ultimately how we can help continue to work together. And then now we find ourselves in this unique position where Matt is the GM at Active Prospect over insurance. I oversee what we call fulfillment at QuoteWizard. So that's really anything that we do on the outreach side. That's our outbound dials and warm transfers, our SMS, our email, even our inbound calls, and a lot of our call technology. So as you can imagine, compliance becomes a big part of that. Following up on customer journeys becomes a big part of that, and obviously having struck that relationship up a decade ago or so with Matt, it comes in handy having that mutual respect now. So
yeah, man, this industry is all about relationships, and there are a lot of great ones. And I'm pretty sure that by doing what I did to introduce myself to you, it got me my last job. So I'll take that as a win all the way around. So
excellent. Except for 2 Sundays a month, we'll be friends. That's the Baltimore and Cleveland game.
That's right. That's right. And hopefully I'll make it out for the Cleveland Ravens game this year, live in Cleveland.
Let's say, wear the Flacco jersey.
Oh, I will. So, all right. So let's take a dive into quarter one. We saw a lot. It was pretty wild, man. We saw a lot with the one-to-one, in compliance being a lot more in the spotlight, a new administration, tariffs, no tariffs. But like, if we look at one-to-one, right, it was knocked down by the courts in a buzzer beater fashion, right? Last minute. And, everybody was scrambling, both buyers and sellers, to determine what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And budgets were all over the place. Volumes were all over the place. There was a lot of uncertainty. And of course, there are a number of TCPA litigators chomping at the bit to find anyone who wasn't participating in one-to-one. They didn't go away overnight either. They changed their scope. But I'm interested to hear from your perspective what Quote Wizard and LendingTree did to get ready for one-to-one, how that changed, and what you're seeing from buyers and carriers alike to how it's impacted their businesses and how they're evolving today.
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You expected one thing, prepped for it. I know we had prepped for it for most of 2024, while also capitalizing on a lot of the return of budget last year, especially in the PNC world. And then again at the buzzer beater, you're putting your foot in the ground and you got to pivot. And I think two things really jumped out and that were surprising. We kind of knew going into 2025 there would be changes, right? You mentioned a couple of them. There was going to be a new administration. We had prepped for the one-to-one consent, doing some testing, doing some customer surveying, just looking and mapping at our journeys, having very, very in-depth and aligned conversations with our carrier partners, and then essentially prepping for what was going to then happen after, right? And I think we all can agree that we don't want a lot of the excess calls on our phone, and we don't want to be down the path of a primary product and then inundated that then distracts from that primary product or dissuades from primary. But at the same time, we do like choice as consumers. We do like to understand when we may be thinking or needing something different that at the time we may find out about in 3, 6, 9 months. And I think that was kind of the balance of last year, especially being a comparative market like a Quote Wizard, having a lot of financial products like a LendingTree, was how does that balance work? So, we spent a lot of time, like I said, kind of looking at the market, talking with our acquisition partners, creating the best possible consumer experience, and then having to shift on that one. That actually, led us down a couple of paths. We understood our customer a little bit more, right? We understood what it meant to empower our consumer to take the right step at the right time, and how that aligned deeply with our carrier partners wanting to acquire. So feedback loops, a little bit more in depth and granularity around, are we meeting them where they want to be met? How are they seeing us and our consumers in terms of their acquisition strategy, and how can we better that position? So that was a really pleasant surprise. I think the flip side of that coin, as you mentioned, Matt, is the litigation didn't go away when the buzzer went off, right? And it surprised me how many people weren't necessarily prepared if the one-to-one went through. And then it really surprised me how much, to your point, whether it was serial litigators or just others, how much they saturated the market. Like, okay, we didn't win that one, so let's go almost Napoleonic. Let's just shoot more bullets downfield and see what we can hit. So, it's a good thing that we spent, 15 months really, really tightening, really, really looking at process compliance, working with partners like yourself to ensure that we had the monitoring, the guardrails, the feedback loops in place on that we could quickly get to look at what's going on, nip things in the bud, and ultimately position ourselves to have an even stronger and more compliant 25. Because again, as that buzzer went off, that compliance didn't go away. It just simply remained what it had been.
Exactly. And that is a massive point that we need to drive home, right? Nothing changed. 1-to-1 went away, but TCPA, prior written express consent, having the consent language on every page and making sure that you're documenting it for evidence, that all stayed the same. And, I think there were some organizations who left their 1-to-1 to chance, which, good or bad, everybody has their own level of risk tolerance there. But, that was definitely one of those things that had a ton of impact, and there were litigators waiting, and nothing changes today. So being compliant is still at the forefront of the lead generation practice.
Yeah, and I think compliance to that, it starts with understanding your own processes. What are you doing and how are you acquiring your customers? Can you effectively follow that customer back to their point of origination? And if you can you understand that point of origination is fully compliant, right? I have ample and utmost confidence in everything that we're doing at Quote Wizard as it relates to, our own marketing efforts. We track it, we monitor it, we work with internal, external compliance and counsel. We ensure that we are putting our best foot forward in that place. But, that does break down the farther upstream you go. And the more you work with, again, companies like yourself, Matt, where you guys can help bridge a lot of those unknowns. You can help to capture a lot of those things, ensure that the customer is getting what the customer really requested, treating them with respect, ensuring that the matching that is being done is being done with the customer's best interest in mind. And then you flip that coin over. Right. And then you follow that customer almost as a tail now downstream. And how are they performing? What do they look like? What's the feedback? What is the customer saying to you? Should you get them on the phone or an email or a text or direct mail? How is that performing then? And what needs to change? Right. And sometimes it's as simple as language, right? And setting a different expectation. Other times it's process. Regardless, compliance is it's kind of the fulcrum of the teeter totter, right? And as you tilt back and forth, as long as you're on a compliant base, you can make the proper adjustments quickly and still maintain, the efficacy of your business overall.
Yeah. I love that. I would love to dive in a little bit more to what you see, and I'm not asking for secret sauce here, but just, when you're going through how you're looking at the long tail there, and what maybe contact strategies you would use. Do you go right to SMS, email? And we'll get to that in one second. I think the other part of this is you made a really good point about, originating domain. And that's something that Trusted Form, is a real differentiator at, is being able to capture that and provide that level of insight in the certificate, so that, if you are looking as a buyer of any records, you could be buying that record from an aggregator or from a lead buyer, and they have their own ways of sourcing data. So being able to at least see a high level of what that consumer saw and where they're coming from is super valuable. And that's something that you could get through our data insights program.
Sure. And it's a great jumping off point, right? To kind of dive into a little bit of the question there, right? It first starts with confidence, right? You have to have a level of confidence that the customer wants something. You have the thing that they want, or more than one thing that could be matched or really good for the customer. Understanding then, you have the right to engage, right? That's the compliant part. That's the, ensuring your TCPA language, ensuring your partner's TCPA language, ensuring your processes are sound. And if you have that really good fundamental base, then you can start to get creative, right? And your creativity comes really then in understanding your customer. and understanding your acquisition partners, and as a facilitator, how do you best meet them, and what are they solving for, right? It's the class. I spent 3 years as a teacher very, very early before I got into insurance, and at the time I thought it was going to be a lot of Dead Poet Society jumping on desks and oh, Captain,
You
my
can see
cat.
that.
And
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, it's not. And then the sexy world of insurance was like, hey, come over here. And I was like, oh, can't say no to that. But in that period of time, we've really seen that things haven't changed. And when I was teaching, it used to be, what's your F of X? What are you solving for? Well, that process is still there today. What's the customer solving for? What are we solving for? How do we solve for it? And then just making sure that each step along the way has that feedback loop. And if you can do that, and you can do that honestly and truthfully and vulnerably, right? It's like having a relationship with a human. If you can do those things, then you can have a really good relationship with your customer. You can have a really good relationship with your buyer, and having that blended relationship, you can make sure that you standing in the middle, right? None of us are tax exempt or whatever as companies. You can make sure that you're protecting your business as well and growing, and doing that with a level of confidence.
Yeah, and that's it's one of those things I hear all the time. As a lead seller, not being able to get good or accurate data back from buyers with performance metrics, right? So essentially, if you don't have that layer, then you're flying blind completely, right? And that kind of, when you're looking at that balance of cost, performance, down funnel performance, without having that go completely one-sided, you have to have that data in your hand as a lead generator to be able to make the right decisions to have that then go downstream.
Yeah.
Are you seeing buyers giving that kind of data to lead sellers?
Yeah, so there's a couple questions in here. I'm going to do my best to lump these all together. So the answer there is we're getting better, right? I can remember 4, 6, 7 years ago, getting at information was tough, right? And it was tough for two reasons. One, the buying feedback loop wasn't tight, right? Getting just data, stitching it together, tying it back to source, or even down to the granularity of state or demo or any of those other things, and providing that back, that was really hard. And in a lot of cases, it's still very difficult, but it's getting better, right? 24, 25, we're seeing a lot more of the feedback loops becoming the in vogue thing, right? And you're seeing, whether it's AI being able to scan data, looking for trends, looking for anomalies, looking for likeness, or it's even things just like API integrations where those things can come back in a little bit more of an easy lift phase. That readiness of data, yes, is starting to come back more and more. Is it perfect? No, we're a long way from perfect right now, but as opposed to a few years ago where, remember, I shouldn't even say remember, think about like if you were at war in Europe in World War I and you're writing a letter home, it was months before it got there. A lot changes in that amount of time, including whether you're alive or not, by the time the letter gets back home. So from our side of things, we're a lot quicker. We're not necessarily real time, but we're not months late at this point. So that piece is much better at figuring out where and how pivots and changes need to be made. That being said, right, the where do people fall short side of that is usage, right? So how are you using that to look at your world and make better decisions, and then B, tracking that back upstream, right? And ensuring that language remains consistent, it remains compliant as the interpretation of TCPA and other processes, even like the TSR, how those shift over time. Are you staying up on kind of what is the 80-20? And I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, so can't offer any advice on it, in terms of, legal specific, but are you staying abreast of what's happening, right? So that you can use the feedback loop you're getting in the best possible way with the landscape as it shifts and changes under your feet. Now, as all of that's shifting around on us, we're starting to see at the federal level, the one-to-one wasn't necessarily going to be the thing that maybe we thought it was in December going into January. Now states are taking it upon themselves. So now we have to be thoughtful at a 51, including DC state level, on how these things are going to interact. How are they going to interplay with one another? What if I live in Cincinnati but work in Kentucky, or vice versa? Those are really close areas. I know at times my IP address can get picked up by Michigan, depending on where I'm at, or even New York, depending on where I'm driving. So how are these things going to interplay across state lines? How are we going to make sure that we remain consistent across the language, the process, all of that feedback loop? And I think that's really where we, as both marketers and we as responsible businesses, that's where we kind of join these things together.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. And it is a wild industry. Just over my last 14 years, seeing the technological advances that have been made. I'm pretty sure when I started, and you might actually know this, there were, and I'll date this a little bit, they were doing fax leads still. And, now we're at the place, right? Now we're at the place where technology, there's scoring, data appends, programmatic feedback loops. All of these things are progressing, and it's getting faster and faster. And at the base and foundation of what we're doing, it's the exact same game, right? It's like finding consumers who have intent and want to talk to somebody. That all exists, but there's been so much development within our space. What are you seeing out there? And I know AI is a big thing. We'll get to that because it's going to be a little bit of a deeper conversation, but interested to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. So funny you bring up fax. The very first customer I sold a policy to way back when Pluto was still a planet, iPhone hadn't even come out yet, was via fax.
Yeah.
It was a piece of paper that was brought over to my desk, said, hey, we got a request from a fax machine, call this customer. It was minutes old, right? It wasn't submitted digitally. It was literally faxed into the office in Solon, Ohio. And I called them, and I had to take the faxed info, put it into the machine, let the machine run the rate. It was like a 30-some minute phone call. I almost needed a lunch break after. And nowadays, we can process things in milliseconds on that side. But it's funny, right? How things change and things don't. Mm-hmm. And back then in the early 2000s, it was still about the customer. And today, I'll use a quick story. My wife loves murder shows, right? Wine and murder shows. If I ever go missing, check the cell phone towers. You're never going to find me, but you can avenge me. I promise you. She'll forget to turn her cell phone off. It'll ping everything.
Perfect.
But the number one thing they tell you in that, right, is means mode of opportunity, right? So that's how you catch whatever happened, to the person. We are in the same kind of boat, right? The first is motive, right? Does the customer have motive? Is it their true intent to do the thing that we believe they set out to do? And you can look at a lot of different data that says they are or they aren't, but in the end, what happens, right? And you can track that through feedback loops, and you can work with your buying partners on that. You can look at your own business and kind of determine, am I generating customers with motive? From there, it's really using your data capture or third-party data capture. I know, it's something Active Prospect has. It's something that LendingTree can leverage as well. But, do we have things that can identify within that customer the opportunity, right? Do we have something for this consumer? I have a driver who's about ready to get his license in the next couple of weeks, right? Not a lot of companies want to, at an affordable price, write a 16-year-old brand new on his or her own policy. Opportunity's not overly there, right? So, as a parent, I'll keep them on mind. My insurance will go up as we understand what risk is. So if we can identify the customer as motive, and we identify that we have an opportunity to present that motive to take action, then it's the means, right? Do they have the dollars and the cents to actually purchase that product? And we see this every couple of years. I think 2023 2023 was a good example of when, insurance was in a down underwriting cycle. We had a lot of profitability concerns in the space, and pricing priced a lot of folks out from change or other areas. So the means to purchase that policy is something then that we can't solve, but if we have enough of the good opportunity, good matching, good feedback loops, all of that, yeah, we can absolutely help that customer. Just like we were 20 years ago looking for means, motive, opportunity at that time, we can look at it now. We just look at it a little quicker and maybe a few layers more on the onion, and it's maybe a little less fax machines and 35-minute conversations, but in the end, solving the same general concept for that customer.
Yeah. So as we have kind of progressed into life after, concern about budgets and volumes, are you seeing lead budgets come back? And also from kind of a perspective of channel, right? You have clicks, leads, calls, rate calls, even embedded. Some of these players are in that world. How are you seeing that kind of split up? And are you seeing any of the channels growing more than others?
It's a great question, and there's a lot to unpack in that. So, without kind of tackling it all at once, maybe we can break it up. But, in terms of appetite in general, right? We all know in the P&C world specifically, there is a cycle that we kind of go through. And what's great, and it kind of referenced it earlier, what's great is we're within this new kind of cyclical world post-COVID, where things like feedback loops, things like adjustments and areas to focus or de-emphasize, those are becoming more readily consistent, right, for marketers, which allows then the marketer, and if you know the FFX and you're solving for it with your buyer, you can figure out how to mitigate some of the peaks and the troughs there for that cycle. Now, what can we do about inflation or tariffs or losses or other things? We, as marketers and or distributors, there's not a ton that we can do in that world, right? We're seeing while losses may cost more to repair a vehicle, losses are actually starting to go down on vehicles, right? You have a lot of safety features, and whether it's lane assist or auto brake or cameras, things like that really help to mitigate some of those things. The flip side, though, now home losses are more expensive. You got the cost of lumber, you've got the cost of asphalt shingles, you've got more severe storms that are blowing through, and weather events. So you've got fires and all of that. So our world is going to be unpredictable enough for us on this side. So what we've got to again make sure that we're doing is continuing to work with our buyers in a way that we're being asked to work in the way that we can as marketers to again means, motive, opportunity our customer. But we are in a world where we're, as we talk to the carriers, as we talk to the agencies, as we talk to the buyers, there is budget, there is appetite. And the Wild West, guns ablazing, we'll take everybody and figure it out later? No. Is it as restrictive as we were in 22, 23? No. It's thoughtful. It's thoughtful budgeting. It is right customer, right product. It's ensuring that we're working together to understand kind of how we join those things together. State plays a lot of part in that, right? How quickly do states want to make rate changes to allow product to open, or how quickly will they increase whenever profitability is shifting? And that's unique by state, sometimes based on profitability of carrier in states. Sometimes it's based on just the state legislature and how quickly they tend to move things through. Maybe it's lobbying and parties in those states not wanting certain things to happen. It could just be negative practices, right? There's states where folks will buzz into your driveway with like emergency lights on, and you think that something's going on, and they just want to try and get you to file a roof claim or something like that. So, we have to be more conscious of just what that budgeting means, how we meet the carrier there. We also have to be thoughtful of the customer, right? One of the questions you asked, Matt, is, like rate and embedding and things like that. I've been doing insurance for a long time, still carry a license and all of that and understand it, but I still will not buy a product without talking to somebody else on it. It's a huge
great point. And that actually from my aggregated data of just talking to a lot of people, I've heard the same thing, right? There was always like for at least the last 4 years, the talk of embedded and the excitement behind that, and the carriers going, I don't know, and the generators going like, this is the next greatest thing. To a point, right? Like if you're in process for a mortgage, or if you're in process to buy a new car, and you can build that into that process, that makes total sense to me. But to your point, when you get to that last step, you want to talk to somebody about it, right? You want to ensure, hey, does everything line up the way I expect it to line up? And I don't see that going away anytime soon.
No, it's something that we always said to our agents when we were training them back in the day. It was taught to me was right. The customer is driving around with the assets in their trunk. And for a young professional that may not be a homeowner, doesn't have a family, there's maybe potentially, I'm not saying for everybody, in a lot of cases, there's less asset there. So are they more comfortable in that digital purchasing process? Yeah, they've been groomed on it, right? Again, when I got into this, I was a young professional. This is pre-iPhone, and shopping on Amazon was still books, right? It wasn't as readily accessible to do this online, but it is advisable, right? In most cases, as you grow and you have assets and you have things to protect, and like I have got two younger drivers, so they have higher risk. It is advisable to QA what you're getting, right? And make sure that you have enough on the bodily injury, and you've got an umbrella and things like that to protect. And not a lot of the general population is as versed in a lot of the meanings, right? And it's hard to teach within a funnel and give that confidence as well without using all of the jargon that we on this call all use every single day. But the other individual, maybe a banker or a roofer or somebody in a non-insurance role, they're not going to understand what all this stuff means. So I love the concept of online journeys. I think that they support fortunately a less social world that we're kind of living in now, and even post-COVID, we've become used to screen to screen as opposed to face to face, and texting. My kids, they rarely see friends; they text friends, and they'll text each other sitting side by side. It's a kind of a command. We're getting closer and closer to like Wall-E, right? Remember the guys working on the cartoon around. We're working our way there, which I don't know how you golf in one of those, but I'm going to figure it out when we get there. But for our customers, we want to provide them all the outlets, right? We want to empower us. We want to empower. We want to make sure that we can support as they want to be supported. We work with, again, our carrier buyers in the back end to make sure that they're supported. The last thing you want to do is put a lot of policies on the books that cause a lot of losses, or even worse, cause E&O claims. So, how do you blend all that together? So I think we're on a path there. I'm kind of with you. I don't think we're necessarily to that finish line yet.
Yeah, and it'll get there in iterations, I think, and those will be good and they'll benefit to a point. And you're right. Who knows? In a couple of years, texting is out of control, man. So clearly there'll be more things in chat. We also support mobile SDKs, right? So there are a lot of companies who leverage mobile environments as well. Being able to capture consent within a mobile app is just as important, right?
Yeah,
so giving different options.
40% of Europe uses WhatsApp to only 4% of the US. So those numbers may be shifting a little bit. So yeah, my kids, they don't, when I say text, that's me dumbing it down, right? They're app communicating through something else. So yeah, it's definitely a different world than that we played in. Now I feel like I got to get off my lawn as I'm saying this, but at the same time, we do have to evolve with the evolving world, and it's just how do we do that and ensure again the efficacy of our business?
Yeah, and we'll if anybody who's listening has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to answer those as we progress. And there's a couple here. The one about what's next in compliance, right? When's the next tidal wave? One-to-one, obviously from a federal level's not happening, but Brock, you may mention states are getting involved. So I think it's 12 of them currently who are looking at some form of one-to-one. So, all the work and the money and investment that you put in to getting a one-to-one practice in place, might be beneficial as we move forward and we start to see how these things play.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's kind of that question of, oh, the state wants to do it, but what about the adjacent states? Or, think of legalized marijuana. You can't fly with it because it's federal. But even if you're going from legal state to legal state on a direct flight, how does that work? So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot to tease out there. I don't know if necessarily it's a this year thing, but clearly 12 out of 50 are saying, hey, we want something here. So from that side, yeah, that noise I don't think is going away. One of the questions that I have within that, and I'm just kind of throwing this one off the cuff, Matt, so I apologize for throwing out, but a lot of the want behind this is the bad kind of
Yes.
calls and things like that. Most of those, they're coming from those that don't follow the rules. So if you're not, as a teacher, we always said that the disciplinary process within a school was made for the 80% of kids that it doesn't apply to, right? So how does that help, right? Like, what can we do as an industry to ensure that, if we're going to follow the rules, we want other people to follow the rules. And that's a hard thing to navigate at a state level too.
Yeah, the unfortunate piece of that is, it's always the lowest common denominator that's kind of pushing these things forward, to your point. And I think as long as we as an industry are focused on consent-based marketing, right? These are people who are showing intent, right? We're not giving you a phone book and saying, hey, go have at it, right? These are people who are raising their hands. Everybody in the process wants a little friction, right? Like if you have a consumer who's shopping, right, there will be friction involved in that, even if it's in a brick and mortar. But if you as a marketer are kind of not looking at that and stuffing things through and not getting, someone who's a hand raiser to be involved, that's going to open up situations, for you as a business, right? You're going to infuriate the consumer. It's going to be bad for the buyer, because if they get that person on the phone, right, that's immediately going to impact their business, their Yelp reviews, right? But those entities exist, and we kind of eye the lowest common denominator. But I think as a general rule, we should all be practicing consent-based marketing the best we can.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And over time, maybe that will lessen the need for these states to be looking at that. But every industry is different as well.
Agreed. Yeah.
So we look at it. It's got to be looked at holistically, and not just insurance.
Yeah, I agree.
When I was at I went to AIR conference last year, and when we were thinking about like external factors, all the stuff that happened during COVID, crazy stuff happened during COVID with cars, used car market, rental cars, right? Everybody sold their rental cars off.
Right.
Like there are these little pockets that carriers were looking at as, this is going to totally screw up my profitability here, right? Because it went from, hey, all these guys have rental cars, to there are no rental cars. They're very, very limited, and they're priced through the roof, right? So that all was happening. But one of the things that I learned last year that I thought was really interesting was, with the new car market, there are sensors even in the windshield, like all over the windshield. And today or yesterday, right, you bought a 1994 Focus, right? It was just like, pop in a new windshield. We're done here. But now you need a technician to be able to handle that. And these technicians have to have schooling, right? And there's this whole list of things that live behind that. And these stories exist all over the place in insurance.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a wild concept. And all that goes into profitability and what they're doing and how that plays into our world.
Yeah. Remember what was it? COVID. There were certain microchips too that we couldn't import, or we were delayed importing, and things
Yeah.
like that were preventing the manufacture of new cars. And so yeah, the used car market, the new car market, all of it was going up. And I even had the example you're talking about. Living in Cleveland, we get a ton of snow, and then you get the plows, and that chews up the road. I took a stone off the windshield, and
Yeah.
called the company, and with, hey, come out to my place of work and fix the thing. Well, by that point, it had cracked all the way across. They couldn't just put the sealant on. So a guy comes out, he's like, I can't do this. He's like, I need to bring it in the shop. It's got to go through sensors. You've got lane assist and things like that. So
Right.
it's going to take a little bit more. And oh, by the way, that's not free. You've got to now pay into your deductible and other parts of it. So I think, yeah, as technology, right, grows in vehicles. And I remember, back in the day, my dad was teaching me how to change oil and things like that. And it was like, oh, a socket wrench and you could rebuild this car, right? Nowadays, it's like, well, no, you can't. You need a computer engineering, and you need all this and everything else. And it's like, yeah, that does, you're right, that does play into the cost. And I think it looms. I don't want to use terminology as if this is like a shoe dropping, but there definitely is there are things like tariffs, right? And a looming technology where when a car does get into an accident, that's a big repair. And if it hits cars, if you're at fault and you hit cars with equal or better technology, that's an even bigger bill. So how does that start to come in? Who's at fault in a self-driving car? If the driver falls asleep, is it the software? Is it the driver? There's just a lot of these things that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever I got in there, how far do you drive to work? You're over 10,000 miles a year. Okay, that's a little more risky. Now, there's other factors in there. So, it's just, yeah, those are things that we as marketers, we have to be aware of. We have to be conscious of. We have to be thoughtful around. I think there were a few brands over the course of last year that were more prone to theft, and those impacted acquisition in our space. And now those are coming back. So those things kind of pop up. And again, the feedback loops are really helpful. There's a question there right now, and I love the question, right? If you could have wave a magic wand, what would you fix, right? Answer one is unlimited budgets, please. That would be fantastic, and we would love that. Buying for all major zip codes, that would be a fantastic one as
Yes.
well. But
Yes.
we understand that that's not realistic. But more instantaneous feedback, more granular feedback, more. I'm not going to use the word trust because I feel like that implies distrust, but more understanding that the information can be used in benefit as opposed to being weaponized. And that's something that I know we and others in the space, we don't do. We don't like to weaponize data. We like to use it and become smarter at it. But I also understand the hesitancy there too, right? Insurance probably is the second oldest occupation in the world, but it certainly is one of the best at gambling. So, you write these algorithms, you understand loss, you understand risk, you understand, all of this stuff, and you place your bets. I'm going to charge you X dollars a month. I'm going to extend to you Y thousands of dollars of risk. And hopefully I'm going to take Z home off the table. And more often than not, it's a winning bet. But, things that change the game in there, the more the feedback loops are tight and vulnerable and truthful and honest and all of that stuff. And the more that we can use that in the same exact way, I think, we get out ahead of a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah. And that feedback loop really is, I think some carriers may look at it as, man, we're giving away too much information, right? There's risk assessment within that data. There's things that we're buying that we don't want everybody to know about.
Sure. Yeah.
But what do we as marketers need to know about, right? It's like, was that a good fit for you, right? And how can we mimic that and continue to scale that up, right? It's not necessarily, hey, we need to know all these kind of nuanced things. They're good to know, right?
Yeah.
They'll help. And you can use those in scoring algorithms, any type of mechanism that you have in place to generate these leads, right? That's good, but you need to have just what that bare minimum of, is this the right consumer for you? How does that play so we can scale this business?
Yeah, 100%. As a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm uniquely qualified to make this analogy, right? Since we returned in '99, we've had 40 quarterbacks, right?
Impressive.
And
What, 5 or 6 this year?
yeah. It's a nickel every year, right? 5 we trot out there, and it's so funny over watching this over 20 years or now 25 years. How the playbook on quarterbacks has changed, right? And at first, you sit them behind a veteran for a few years, you let them develop. You think Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, and then they come out and they're and then that pivots into, well, no, we got to trot them out there, we got to get them reps, they got to break them in, the Peyton Manning or the
Right.
Mahomes kind of style. In the end, the playbook changes, right? If you went back and asked Newt Rockne how he would run the game today, I'm sure he would have a way different answer based off of all of the information and everything coming in than he had, back in his day. Our playbook as both marketers, distributors, organizations like yourself that kind of sit to help bridge these gaps in the middle, the playbook shifts on us, right? And the more that we can do to maintain alignment, to meet both customer and buyer where they want to be met. And this is true of PNC or health or Medicare. And then being abreast of, it's like a Rubik's Cube, right? Being abreast of the three-dimensional things that shift in there, the landscape of compliance, the state and federal level regulations, like a 1-to-1 or now what could be state level. Just being abreast of all of that stuff and having that all put in there, we can make sure that we maintain, again, that consent-based marketing, the aligned shift in landscape, the feedback loops that are in there. The most ideal thing in the world would be a marketer to market to one person, and that one person buy one product, and they hold the product forever.
Right.
If that's the pinnacle of everything, then we've got to work backwards from that, right? How do we figure out how close to that we get?
Yeah, and that's the balance. It's always the balance, right? It's you have to have a scalable business at the end of the day, all the way around. Right? You need the volume. It is a numbers game, and it always will be. And you just want to get those numbers better. If you're making those numbers better,
Well, listen, AI is going to solve that.
Yeah, so let's get into AI. Let's start real quick. We do have another poll that we haven't shown yet, but let's pull up poll number 2. And
is it when to be afraid of AI? Because it's when they start asking for Sarah Connor.
Yeah,
that's where
Let's see. All right. How well positioned do you feel TCPA compliance processes are? So let's get some answers in there, and we'll keep on moving. There's one of the things I did want to call out surrounding, consent language management. We have Trusted Form has a great new compliance check coming out in the Verify product. So contrast ratio and color checks, which allow users to make sure that the color and the contrast ratios are, within that consent language are good enough that the text in the background aren't the same color, right? And that ensures clear and conspicuous consent language is present. So that will be launching next week. So if anyone is interested in getting that functionality within Verify, please add it to the chat and we'll be sure to reach out. So AI. So AI automation, I think, when we look back, Brock, on that wonderful panel we did at LeadsCon, which was great, man. I hope we get to do that again. And we can continue maybe doing these every few quarters just to kind of re-up on what's going on in the industry and maybe bring in a couple other folks to continue the conversation. I'd love to do that. But, Jessica Freeman from Gainsco made a fantastic point about AI and how we as a generation, we as an industry are looking at AI as like AI. It's all the same. A lot of it's automation. And when you go into a contracting phase or a procurement phase with a carrier, they look at that as AI, and that contracting and procurement is completely different than automation. And I think what we learned in that is, if you're not truly doing AI the way that, people are looking at that as, look at it as automation and work through that contracting phase better. So that was a cool thing that we learned together from Jessica. But what are your thoughts on AI, man? I know you've been in that space for a while.
Yeah, it's funny. We all looked at AI years ago, right? It was going to be the
Yeah.
great liberator of time and resource and everything. And how many people now? I know I'm guilty of it too. We use AI as personal physician, right? And okay, it used to be WebMD, but WebMD was either you're dying or it's a sinus infection. Now AI is giving you a little bit more in depth training on that. We got a new dog about a week or so ago, and AI can produce for me training routines, and then I can go down the rabbit hole of crate training and food and things like that. So a lot of that though is it's closed and it's protected and it's safe, and companies bring it in and they look at it and say, okay, we can use this for really great things, navigating benefits, answering common questions, ensuring that our employee base is up to speed, creating automated or standardized tests within technology or penetrated tests and regression and things like that, or even checking code. But it's a lot of that though is very kind of still tight. It's still kind of bound up. The true generative, like free thinking, there's still a lot of hesitancy there, right? You don't want to be the AI that gives the way wrong answer, or
Totally.
put something out there that hurts the brand or offends the consumer. So there is this back and forth of like, what is it that we're doing and getting, and count your buzzwords from 20 years in the space and where that is today. I think there is something here, right? I use this example in Vegas at our last conference, but think of the 8th grade date effect, right? I'm a customer, or in my case, I was an 8th grader, and I was calling my girlfriend's house to ask her to go see a movie, and the sheer terror I had that her dad or brother was going to answer that telephone, and the joy and elation that I got if it was her mom's sister or even her, right? And how people in today's world, we have a lot of that same fear that I had to do this a couple of weeks ago to call, my cable company, and yes, I still have cable, but call them because I was having an issue, and just the terror I had that I was going to get a live human being that couldn't help me and would have to bounce me around to 6 or 7 different places, or a push button IVR that I couldn't get out of, right? And now I'm in the doom loop of zeros or ones or twos or whatever.
Yes.
Imagine replacing that with something that can guide you, right? Automation, something that understands what I'm saying, I'm asking, it's patient with me. It's not going to have a bad day because it got a flat tire on the way in, or it's tired, or all of the stuff that we as humans experience and makes us genuinely human. There's some great opportunity here. But again, is that AI or is that more automation?
It's like machine learning and language processing, and those things I think are super beneficial, not just from the marketer and lead generation perspective, but for claims, right?
Yeah.
Especially off hours. Right?
Off hours, or catastrophes where they're coming in a mile a minute,
Yes.
and you don't want people sitting outside saying, well, gosh, what am I going to do? This was my house, this was my business, this was everything else that I owned. You want to be able to process that. I absolutely agree with you on that, Matt.
All right, Brock, we're getting close here. Do you have any things that you want to touch on before we move on here?
Just again, a sincere thank you to Active Prospect, Matt, to yourself. I agree. I think picking this thing up in the future and taking a look and saying, where were we wrong, right? That was the whole premise of our talk in Vegas, was assumption versus intuitive leap, right? And the difference there is, back in the 90s, I think it was Left Eye, T-Boz, and Chili told us don't go chasing waterfalls. But prior to that, Einstein said when the data leads you down one path and there's no other result, that's an intuitive leap. So where were we wrong and where were we right going into this year? That's changed, right? And now the back half of this year, guess what? We're going to be wrong in a lot of the things that we said here. We're going to be right in a lot of the things that we said. Let's revisit it. Like, let's be honest and take a look. So, I think the next one of these I may be looking at is a conference in the fall, and there's actually a couple of them coming up. So, Matt, we'll look to retread the tire on that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Always welcome, and it's always great to hear your perspective on these things. And I appreciate you being here today for sure. And a big thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day and participating in this webinar. A huge thank you to Brock. It was a lot of fun. Please mark your calendars and join us on May 28th for our next webinar titled Financial Perspective, a consent-first approach to scale your business and bolster ROI, with Phoebe Pinder from our side, sales director, and our great friend, Joey Liner, chief consultant and strategist at Liner Connections. Do love that guy. He's the best.
He is.
There'll
Also a
be
helpful
a
friend.
link in the chat to register for that now if you'd like. And lastly, if you would like to continue this conversation, please reach out to us via the contact us link that is in our chat or by answering our poll. Again, thank you to everyone. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you.